welcome to today's special episode. Today we celebrate 20 years of the University of Johannesburg, and we're joined by three esteemed guests who have played pivotal roles in shaping the direction of our department. We'll explore how supply chain education has transformed and the biggest industry shifts. Welcome, Prof. Prinsloo, Pisa, Walters. Thank you so much for joining us. I think before we start, you should all just tell us a little bit about yourselves, how you've landed where you've landed now. We'll start with you, Prof.
Well, I started here in 1972 as an honors student, and then joined the academia in 1974. Obviously, in the meantime, also studying. And I left the university, then the Rand Afrikaans University, this department, in 1980, and spent some 21 years in private practice, various companies, etc. And then rejoined the department in 2001, and has been with the department in various capacities since then.
Thank you so much, Prof. Nini.
I joined the department in 2015. Had just completed my postdoctoral fellowship at the Northwest University, where I had completed a PhD in international trade, and I joined the department as a lecturer in 2015, and I've been here at UJ for the last 10 years.
Okay. Walters?
Yeah, I actually started studying transport economics on the old campus, the old brewery campus of the Rand Afrikaans University in Braamfontein. And then I worked in private practice and was approached to join the department to do my doctorate. So it was a sponsored doctorate on aviation. So I joined the department in, I think, 1989. I can't remember the dates anymore, to do my doctorate. So I've been in the department formally since about 1989.
Wow, that's amazing. So I think we'll start with you, Prof. Walters. What was the vision behind establishing the department 57 years ago? Because the university is 20 years old, but the department is 57 years old.
I think there was a general need for transportation training in the country. You know, we're a very open economy. We trade with the rest of the world. Although we're a small economy, you know, shipping is important, aviation is important, rail links into Africa, road links into Africa, and so on. You know, and there was a big need, I think, to educate people in transportation in South Africa in general. At that stage, the biggest transport haulier in the country was really the railway service, with South African Airways and the shipping companies and so on. And a lot of expertise there, but gradually, you know, government at that time opened up the market to the private sector, especially road transportation. And there was a need to educate people working in that sector. So we were, I think, the second department to be established. First one was in Stellenbosch, I think. Gerrie?
Yes, the railways, at the time, South African Railways and Harbours played a pivotal role in establishing this department as well, as it established within Stellenbosch in 1965. It established a Department of Transport with the funding of the South African Railways and Harbours. When the Rand Afrikaans University was established in 1967, it was decided that, call it modern departments, newish departments, should also receive attention, and the management which was appointed then approached the Department of Education. And also at that time, there was a global move to pay more academic attention to especially transport and the economy of transport, as it was realized that the development of countries and economies rests heavily on transport. Rail transport specifically in the South African context, where long distances were important, and in the shorter distances like Europe, the UK, etc., there was a greater move also onto road transport. So that was a move to establish the department as a modern department, if you can call it that. And since then, obviously, the department under various heads, mostly under Professor Walters and his time of tenure here, had developed not only in transport economics, but also logistics, and is now in the next phase of supply chain management, keeping thread and track of what is happening in the world of academic training in this particular field.
And what would you say were some of the challenges in the formative years, Prof?
Is making individuals aware that transport is a specific domain which requires very specific training, as it was fashion to study accountancy and from there go, or engineering. And it was felt that engineering, and it was the basis, it is coincidental that at the time of the establishment of this department, it was an engineer at Railways who felt that there was more. He was the head of South African Railways and Harbours at the time, Dr. Loubser, and he felt that there's a need to continue and more branch out and specific training in management, economics, etc. of transport.
I think one of the other challenges was, student numbers. If you look at the university, if you look at marketing or accounting or in economics, you have large numbers of students. And this is a very specialized field within economics, focusing on economics of transportation. So we always had, in earlier years especially, our groups are small. I mean, our honours class, and I did honours, we were 10 or 12 people. Today, we have to limit the numbers to 160 because of the capping of the university. So it was a slow growth at the beginning, and it was always we were in the beginning really in a survivalist mode, because of the funding issues and low student numbers and so on. There were many discussions around that, but I think we prevailed at the end of the day, and I think we proved to the university authorities then that there was a need for transport economics training. If you look at other internationally, there were very well established schools, Northwest University in the USA, throughout Europe, Australia, and so on. And we were a bit late as far as that's concerned, but we also paced them as far as that's concerned, so we could prove that there was a need. And today we know we were proven correct, that even with low student numbers and the fact that it was a specialized field, not a field that people said, it's a glamorous field like accounting and something like that. Now people know it's very essential to have training in logistics and supply chain management to progress and also reduce the cost of trade for South Africa across the spectrum.
And how would you say the supply chain landscape has changed since the formative years of the department?
I think, we began training in transport economics, which is a subset of supply chain management. Supply chain management is a much wider concept, and first it was physical, transport economics and physical distribution. In fact, Gerrie, he was the first doctoral student in South Africa that did the study in physical distribution. Yeah. And that was at the beginning of logistics and then supply chain management. So we really followed the growth and establishment of these different disciplines within the department itself and broke new ground as far as that's concerned in South Africa. So it was transport economics, physical distribution, and then logistics, and then supply chain management. But logistics is a portion of supply chain management. It falls under supply chain management. And transport economics is a very important subset of both those disciplines, logistics and supply chain management. It's about 12-14% of all the costs in logistics is transport economics. So it's still a very relevant field, although we see students moving towards supply chain management more and more and away from transport economics, which is a worldwide trend, not only in South Africa.
Yeah, and also there was always an emphasis on strategic planning. The department, the management of the department, sometimes 2 or 3 individuals would get together and look at trends worldwide, what was required in the South African context, and then would determine a strategy. Strategic management, strategic planning was also a very, very intern part of the department. So that helped the department to be in the forefront all the time, utilizing and currently also utilizing modern technology, etc., new trends, and to be able to provide students with the knowledge to be able to go out in the marketplace.
I think I can add to that. We also worked with and through the industry itself. You know, they were really our partners. We collaborated with the industry extensively over those years to see what the latest trends were. You know, the curricula were evaluated by them. What do we need here? How do we expand? Where do we focus in the next 5, 10 years, and so on? And in fact, the fact that we've had that collaboration with the industry established our short courses or non-subsidized programs. And there we've trained maybe 100,000 people over the years on these short courses. They're still very popular. We have to limit the numbers every year. And even to today, you know, we limit the numbers to 3,500 students. On top of our other offerings, you know, normal academic offerings. So we believe that the fact that we've worked with the industry and government, you know, and through strategic planning in our department, it really assisted us in establishing the department being on a very sure footing.
Now the department, the very knowledge which is conveyed, and if one could call it that, the laboratory of supply chain management, of transport economics, whatever, physical distribution, logistics, is not in a closed room with smoke and a few individuals thinking up Einstein theories. No, it is going out there, being involved with industry. This department was 11, 13 years old. In 1980, it started collaborating very closely with the industry out there, offering programs which are not subsidized by government, but where the industry provide, in some instances, lecturing staff, making sure that whatever is taught to those students is practical and applicable in their working environment, in the various fields of road transport, transport management and logistics. So that has been a trend right through the history of this department. And that also, to some extent, allowed the department to go out in the worldwide laboratory and visit countries overseas, have contact with overseas entrepreneurs, have contact with overseas academics. And that's one of the backbones and strengths of the department.
Prof. Pisa, I'd like to bring you in to just talk about what your views are with regards to how the graduates or the expectations for graduates have evolved, like in your time, and then I think we'll move back to what the expectations were in the past.
I think students are more aware of the field of supply chain management. It's now a very interesting field that's dynamic and has a lot of career opportunities. So as opposed to the early days of the department, we're receiving more and more applications, and I think information about the field is now readily available, and the opportunities that the supply chains present are more widely publicized. I think COVID has made everyone aware of the importance of global sourcing and now looking inward into local suppliers and so forth. So the impact has been felt inherently by everyone, directly and indirectly. So our students are very much aware of the field and are excited to join our department. If you look at our non-subsidized programs, majority of our applications are towards the logistics program, which has gained more interest. It's now the marketing of 2020s. It's now the popular field as opposed to the transport and economics field in the past. So I think students are aware that it's also a dynamic field that gives them a lot of competencies in different areas, and it gives them a good footing in the industry, in the workspace, as it gives them a lot of career opportunities ranging from your transport. If it's transport, it's either passenger or freight. They can get careers in warehousing, analytics, and so forth. So the spectrum is quite broad, and students are excited to be part of this field and the opportunities that it presents.
Yeah, at the beginning, you asked the question about the beginning, it was more operational, I think. I don't know whether you agree, it was more operational.
Yeah.
We taught students how to route and schedule vehicles, how to do costing on paper sheets, vehicle selection, vehicle replacement, very much focused on that area, and rail operations itself and airline operations. Today, I think it's much more it's there still, but obviously we've moved on with technology. So we teach the basics of all of that. We still do, but with aid of laboratory work and things like that. But also much more strategic, how to position companies, supply chains in South Africa, how supply chains compete with each other, what are your competitive edges that you have within your supply chain vis-a-vis your competition, how does that make you more competitive? It's much more going that for artificial intelligence, things like that. Today, I think the focus has shifted from primarily that focus in the beginning to a combination of tactical operation, and strategic training. All those three levels: strategic, tactical, operational training. So if you look at the operational, tactical, lower tactical training, we do that through our diploma programs, mostly on the Bunting Road campus, and then up middle tactical, strategic more on this campus, the Kings Bay campus, through the degree programs. So you have to split the two, because it's two different student groups mainly that we deal with, although they can cross over under certain circumstances. So yes, I think business has moved on. We must not forget that. Business trade has become much more sophisticated. International trade, our markets that we serve have changed as well. So it's important to keep pace with that and equip the students with the right tools to do the work that's expected of them. But even at the strategic level, we expect them to have a practical element in their thinking and doing. When they walk out of our department, they should be able to apply their knowledge immediately in the place of work. That's always been a focus of the department. This is what the industry wants for us. In any case, they don't want students that are just academically trained and not practically orientated and cannot do the work. So it's important for us to equip our students properly, especially if you look at the postgraduate programs where we focus on that.
Okay. And I think an important issue is also tied to that, by bringing the message across, was the good contact that the department had with industry representative bodies, like the Road Freight Association, the Southern African Bus Operators Association, which the department had close ties, and the department is a member of those. So there's constant communication there. There's good contact with the rail and also the Department of Transport. The Department of Transport is the governing body. There's always been good contact there. So on the transport side, and then the development, obviously, where there's manufacturing companies manufacturing product, which needs to be warehoused, distributed, and ultimately sold. So individuals in the department has good contact with that. And there's a cross-pollination that takes place then in the department and with the students, making it fairly attractive for them to find a job afterwards. And we had done a study some few years back, quite a number of years back now, that the majority of our students find job opportunities in industry. Just to give you an example, we train, and part of, as Prof. Walters had alluded to, we give some background training on aviation. And we find some of our students end up in some of the big banks who give finance to buy airplanes, and they have to do to do a study to see if it is viable. So there's a variety of job opportunities if you have a transport and logistics background, which is ultimately what students want. They want to study something that gives them a job after they've completed their education. But that's on top of the ones which we need in academic life to do the studies, the master's degrees, the doctorates, to equip themselves with knowledge that they can then convey to younger people who will need that and could apply that knowledge.
I think what's interesting, I was just thinking about what Gerrie was saying, is that if you look around you, look at these buildings, the doors, the tables, your cell phones, all of it's been touched by logistics. From place of origin to place of destination where the consumer wants it, or place of production to consumption. Whether it's a farm, whether it's a factory, all of that is logistics and supply chain management. So students find a variety of work there are at least 14 or 15 areas that they can specialize in and go and work in industry. That's related to supply chain management, like warehousing and some warehousing. Within a warehouse, for instance, you have all the systems, you know, the logistics there, the inbound, outbound logistics, the security issues. There are all areas that you can specialize in. So it's a very big field that we are training in. And as I say, you know, everything that you see around you has been touched by logistics. Some form of logistics, whether it's aviation or shipping or rail or road. It doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't come here by itself. It's been organized to get here, and you have to organize that. And this is what we are doing. We're training students to organize things out there. Organize your transportation, the cost of transportation, distribution of goods, you know, in a cost-effective and efficient manner. Which mode of transport, whether it's locally or internationally, they have to do this. They have to manage this. So many of our students end up in these businesses doing this type of work.
Yeah.
And very important, if you tie to that, everything culminates into the importance of making it economical, which means you must get more money in than what you spend, ultimately grow the economy. That's why we were so privileged when Professor Pisa joined us with an economic background, putting more emphasis on the money side. How do you judge that? How do you make sure that ultimately it's to the benefit not only to a company, but to the country as a whole?
Can you comment a little bit on that, Prof. Pisa?
Yes, so I think as you asked how the discipline and the students are also evolving, I think we are also having an evolution of mindset as we are aware the high unemployment rate in the country. Students are also starting to be interested in the entrepreneurial side of supply chain management and logistics. So we encourage our students to explore that element and attend various courses that are availed by the university that provide Finance 101, etc. As part of our holistic training. It's not just about the theories and practices of supply chain management and transport economics, but here at UJ, we want to produce a holistic graduate that can make it out there in the world. In the event that a student doesn't find a job, we find a lot of our students are becoming quite entrepreneurial, and they come back to us as alumni to showcase what they have done. They want to be guest lecturers to other students, so I encourage them and also expose opportunities for those students to think about outside the box, beyond getting formal employment. Those opportunities exist. But ultimately, our discipline is about optimization to maximize profits for our businesses, which is mostly private sector, but even for government, profits are very important. So we will aim to help students with the strategies and principles to find the best and most cost-effective way of moving goods across the value chains, but also giving the most value to the consumers at the end of the day. And we find that the field is rapidly evolving. I mean, overnight we had last mile delivery in door-to-door delivery, something that we didn't envision would happen, but COVID accelerated such things. So we find that the opportunities and the changes in the industry are quite dynamic and frequent.
And what would you say are some of the technologies that are changing supply chain education? Yeah,
so a lot of advancements have happened in the supply chain space as well as the transport field as well. And as academia, one of our challenges is always to keep up with those changes in industry that are being applied. As Prof. Walters alluded to, our students need to be equipped to be able to step into roles in industry and be able to do a job. So we've introduced simulations in our teaching, which expose students to things like artificial intelligence, blockchain, so that they have an idea of how these things work in practice. So specifically, for example, at the honors level, we've got a supply chain module, and in this module, they've got a supply chain simulation where in the semester, the students actually have to plan, design, and manage a supply chain utilizing different techniques and technologies to make business decisions. And then at the end of the semester, the students are evaluated on those supply chains, and the lecturers determine which supply chain was the most effective. So we have had to incorporate various techniques to expose students to the prevailing technologies, and so that we can keep up. Something that we are also looking into is augmented reality, so that we can have labs where students visit labs where your undergraduate students, our classes are quite large, so it would not be feasible to take a class of 200 students to a warehouse. Companies usually limit the number of students we can bring. So those are some of the avenues we're exploring, so that students have got real life experience of what is required or what they experience in the job, and make decisions around that. And we bring that to the classroom and make it part of the learning and assessment process to help students to be equipped with what's expected in reality.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Also,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I think what's from a technology point of view, things have changed so much. If you look at Amazon today, you can sit on your phone here and order something from Amazon, but you think about the supply chain behind that. And if you buy it, say, from the US, how does it get here in 3 days? All those things must be taught. So the visibility in supply chains is very important from a security point of view, a customer point of view, customer service point of view, satisfactory point of view, and so on. So I think visibility has helped a lot, to make supply chains more efficient and people more aware of what's going on. You mentioned in COVID time, the fact that you can buy your groceries over the internet. Many people did that, although it was banned in the beginning of COVID. It really was the catalyst for the growth of many of these big delivery services now that you have, Checker 6060 and those, Look how successful these things are. That's all logistics, because those guys must pick their stuff and the closest shop must deliver it there. There's a system behind them for ownership of those motorcycles, employment, so, and then supplementing those shops from the central warehouses. So it's grown a lot, it's changed a lot, and we have to keep up with that in our training.
No, I think the world has changed. If you take the 70s, 80s, the world has changed, which the emphasis is on efficiency, sustainability and efficiency. You may have a product which is developed in a particular country or in a company which is then manufactured in a completely different thousands of kilometers away. My very watch, not this one, the other one, that was manufactured in China. I ordered it on a Wednesday. It was dispatched from China on the Thursday. I got it the next week, Wednesday, at my doorstep. Now you can imagine that kind of approach that you need to instill that in the students as well. Continuously utilizing new technologies. That's where blockchain and those issues, data analysis, what you have available, and then teaching the students that they must have a broader mind. The emphasis 50, 60 years ago was how to drive a truck. Now it is completely how does the truck fit in the movement of the goods. So you have to teach them that they have to take that into account. And the distribution, all of that goes hand in hand. Well, AI coming in. Okay, there's big talk now, not only in our department. How do you use AI for students? How do you use AI in practice? I've had experience in the last week where we're sitting to design courses, and we ask a number of names. AI tell us the names, and then we can select whether it makes sense or not. It's still up to the individuals to do. But that's the kind of emphasis which is in the department and is the new developments for the future. Subscribing to the university's move to the fourth industrial revolution.
And Prof. Prinsloo, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges supply chain education faces today?
Having individuals who wish to study and convey the knowledge. That's entice them to really spend their time on that, because there's so many opportunities out there, not sitting and to develop, not necessarily having to develop. That's the biggest challenge, to attract individuals who are willing to do that. As it's much more attractive to go out and only concentrate on a particular area and make a career out of that. That's probably one of the biggest challenges, and one would have to address it. And that's where training and education obviously comes in. You will find individuals, but it remains a challenge.
Prof. Pisa, what's your view?
I believe that the challenges are twofold. I think we face a crisis of funding in higher education. A lot of students want to study, but they don't have the funds. So we have a lot of students enrolling. Some of them drop out because they don't have funds to continue. And that lack of funding trickles down to their access to resources to fully support them in their educational journey. On the other side, I think another challenge is with the advent of AI. The burden of teaching basic fundamental skills has increased. By that I mean students have a plethora of resources that they can access to assist them to do assignments, etc. But I think those resources can enhance once the fundamentals and principles are in place. So our jobs as educators has grown to first of all teach the fundamentals, but also the ethics and the skills to utilize those available resources to make it authentic. So we have to teach our students that they need to understand the basics first, then only when they know the basics can they use assistance to enhance the output that they have. So I think it brings an element of wanting to enhance critical thinking. And I think COVID was, in a way, an avenue for us to move forward in that. When we're in lockdown, students could not attend class, could not do assessments in person, and as a department and as a university, we were forced to overnight upskill and also upskill the students at home to critically think, apply themselves, and move towards a different form of assessment, case study-based assessments, and critical thinking, not just your textbook-based assessments. So I think the burden on the education system is quite significant. And as you know, public-funded universities also often have limited resources to be up to pace with the technological developments, whether it's in industry or in the education space. But I think we have fully qualified academics, and the university is quite supportive. It's a 4IR focused and now 5IR university, and it's constantly investing in systems and opportunities for both academics and students to keep up to pace with the developments and to come out and produce a well-rounded and ready graduate out there.
I think one of the challenges is to continuously innovate, to be relevant, to have an impact. So innovation for me is really a challenge. And innovation, I think, rests on a number of things. One is contact with the industry, to know what goes on in the industry. And not only to follow, but also to lead, to influence direction of companies, investments, and so on. So innovation for me is important. And that's where, as Gerrie mentioned earlier on, we in the department has a culture of strategic planning. And there, you'll take all these things into account and look at innovation. Where should we focus? What should we change? How do we change that? And to be up, in front of some of these developments and lead some of these developments. I believe at the beginning of this department's establishment, we led a lot of these developments. And today, it's a challenge to keep up the pace of change is so fast. And to keep innovating is very important. And if you look at the university system in South Africa, it often works against that because it's so tedious and so difficult, to build these things in a short space of time. Sometimes you have to innovate and you do something in 2-3 months' time, that type of thing. But if you want to do it fundamentally in your course, changing direction, the course design, and so on, it could be a 2-year process. So, and I think this is the experience of universities worldwide. Many people criticize universities. They're not leading these developments anymore, but because of bureaucracy, I think. So we try and innovate as fast and as much as possible to be relevant and to maintain the impact that we've had over the years in the industry. And that impact is also through our lecturers. They must also be well trained, well schooled, and focusing on the specialized areas of training in training students, but also be aware of innovation in their respective fields of training that they are teaching. And therefore, it's also important not only to have linkages in South Africa with business, but also internationally with business and academia internationally, to see what they are doing. Because often some of these innovations you find in first world countries that we know will come to South Africa. So if you're in touch with them, you know what's coming, and you can prepare for that. So it's important that we be in touch to be relevant, to have impact, and to innovate continuously.
I want to put something on the table for the future. I can still vividly remember when I was given figures written on a paper, 1 + 1 = 2. And I could see, and I was given matches, 1 + 1 is 2. Then when I grew older, I was asked to believe that a little machine that I pushed buttons on, 1 + 1 is 2. I didn't do it myself anymore. The machine gave me that. Then later, I had another machine. If I push it and I say divide the 2 by 2, and it gives me 1. I didn't do it myself anymore. I relied on the technology to do it. Then if I wrote a letter, I wrote it on a piece of paper, and I put it on the leg of a dove, and I sent the dove away. And the person received it on the other side. No, you don't use doves anymore. You write the paper and you put it in a box, or you go to a place and you send it, and the person on the other side believes what that paper had been sent by me. Then the development came that no more papers. I just go to a machine and I press, and all of a sudden my colleagues or my friends or whoever receives on a machine, and we believe that that message had been sent by me to you. We believe it. We don't question it anymore. In the beginning we did. I'm just questioning whether AI should not be accepted. Teach the students how to use AI and say, we believe AI, you're going to give us the answers. We'd have to choose amongst them, but AI will give us the answers. There's a lot of hesitation, especially in the academic world. We call it plagiarism. There's big talk about plagiarism using AI. But did we not do the same? My question, in transport, and I believe transport can be in the forerunner in using AI, selecting different ways of solving our supply chain problems, whether it's road or rail or whatever the case may be. But we can play a role in that instead of questioning all the time, like we did. In the end, that's new technology, and technology rules the world. It's no longer the other way around.
But where do we draw the line in terms of people knowing the fundamentals and making good decisions, and them just being overly reliant on all the options that AI, like how will we teach thinking then?
That's the problem. The individuals designing the AI and then utilizing that. That is a problem that needs to be solved in the next 10 years. And I'm going back to my computer development, which I tried to do. And the internet. We believe the internet is something that is sent. We accept it. And we'd have to use similar technologies. We're getting scared of the future that AI is going to tell us humans how to run our trucks and how to do our warehousing. But we probably have to have a completely different mindset as to how we approach it. That's something we need to address, because I'm sure AI is here to stay.
I think the fundamentals remain important. Without the knowledge and understanding of how a supply chain works, without the principles, AI is garbage in, garbage out. So I think it's what we are preaching to the students. The classroom is not going to be replaced. I believe our careers are still relevant in that we still have to understand the fundamentals, and then AI can help us to refine and apply scenarios and integrate different knowledge that would have taken us much longer. But if the fundamentals are not in place, the questions we ask AI and the answers we get are not going to be as good if the fundamental knowledge is not in place. So our teaching is now designed to impart this knowledge to students. AI, we know it's inevitable. They are utilizing it. But us as the experienced eye, we can differentiate where the basics are missing and where a higher level of application and critical thinking is being applied. So I think the fundamentals still remain important. It's a tool that's used to enhance a base level understanding of the concepts. But if you just apply it without those principles and without the context, it will give you solutions that are not context specific and that are not also relevant to solve the problems that we're trying to solve.
Prof. Walters, I think you said something about writing.
Yes, I think one of the great things that we want our students at the end of the day to be able to do is to reason in writing, to not, because if you look at just AI and you ask a question and give one page and they change that a bit, it's not their own work in my view, and this is a worldwide phenomenon throughout universities. I read an article just last week around the problems around AI, people having theses being developed by AI and then just modifying it. If you look at it critically, there are many things in AI currently that we can still pick up quite easily in these documents. But it's going to evolve as we. For me, one of the bigger challenges is to allow students to express themselves in writing. And that's a skill that they have to develop from a young age, at the university, going to more advanced studies, to express yourself. And AI won't help you with that. It'll modify your text and things like that in an artificial way. But you have to have your own identity. You must be able to express yourself and reason logically on paper when someone reads something. And that's one of my big concerns, is that we may lose that skill going forward, in putting our thoughts on paper. Already we don't write with the hands anymore, we just type, My wife says she's very happy about that because you can't make up my own writing. So we taught ourselves how to type, but I mean, we must still be able to express ourselves even if you use a laptop or something like that. So I think that's going to be one of the challenges, is to really make sure that the work of students are really their work. And therefore, these exams afterwards, in retrospect after something's handed in, I think it's good to really examine a student on the fundamentals of a thesis or a master's dissertation or something like that, to make sure there's not a misuse of AI and someone didn't pick it up. But it's becoming a big challenge for lecturers, I think, to distinguish, what's the student's work and what's not. At the moment, it's not difficult to pick it up. It's becoming more and more difficult, and this is the challenge I think that we're going to face.
Okay. I mean, just still on that, what are your predictions for the future of supply chain education or supply chain as a whole, and what advice would you give to the next generation of supply chain professionals?
I think the world of work is becoming more and more complex. World trade is becoming more complex. You see what's going on in America, onshoring versus offshoring. Donald Trump wants to have much more onshoring of plants and so on, but that has its own implications, in supply chains, because many of the supply chains currently are based on where the most cost-efficient and cost-effective production can take place. And then you import that. If you look at a motor car, for instance, in South Africa, it maybe has 12,000 spare parts. It comes from all over the world. Now, what Trump is saying, we want to do that all onshore. And if you do that, you're breaking up those supply chains. You may have challenges in production in America, the cost of production, and so on. So I think that will just what he's doing there will trigger a rethink of how we teach supply chain management, and teach students the fact that if this is an optimized supply chain, if you break that, what are the consequences for you in the country if you do onshoring instead of offshoring or a combination of the two. So I think the challenge will be how to deal with these the new thinking that Trump is doing, and people wanting to do it themselves instead of, as we've been teaching students, purchase the stuff where it's cheapest and most efficient. And mostly in China these days, if you look at everything that we are using, to beat China is going to be very difficult in many respects. So I think in the future it is innovation to make sure that we stay ahead of these developments, that we understand the impacts of changes in economic policies in big economies like the American economy affecting us here in South Africa. Our exports of fruits, motor car spares and stuff like going to America, what's the impact going to be? And that they understand this, And similar, I think in America, the schools and transports and supply chain management will start training students there as well, where you have a whole fundamental flip in economic thinking in the country based on what Trump is doing. What will the impact be? That's going to take time. But you have to be aware of these things and the impact, not only of technology, but also of policy changes and the impact of that on supply chain management and sourcing.
I think it's very much being affected by what is the realities of the world. If we look at the world currently, our population growth is faster than our economic growth. So that in itself poses problems, and hence movements like what Professor Walters is saying, self-preservation. But you can only go to so far. So those areas has an effect, and then one would have to look at what is best in your particular environment. But one should be careful not to only look at the global picture. Ultimately, it's looking after yourself and to develop what is practical for that particular enterprise in terms of supply chain, etc. And it will be, what do you call it, ebbs and flows. It will sometimes be towards more globalization. 15, 20 years ago, everybody was jumping on the globalization issue, which had an effect that some products were manufactured extremely economically in a particular area, but meant that other communities lost out. Now the move is going back. It's not only America that's going there. There's a number of other countries who are also putting that in. So the realities of that will impact on the training that we give in terms of supply chain. And how do we define supply chain, utilizing new technology.
And agility, supply chain agility,
Yes.
to be able to adapt quickly to changing circumstances, because that could be overnight,
Yeah.
like in COVID time.
Yeah.
But I think certainly, and I think many supply chain managers in South Africa are currently very concerned, but what's going on in America and how they should redesign, redevelop their supply chains, maybe find new markets, and marketing is also one of the elements of supply chain management. It's the other side of the coin. So it's important to get new markets for our products if you can't access the American market through tariffs, the 10% and maybe the 31% tariff that they want to have on our exports to America.
And a lack of knowledge as to how new innovation is going to react. I clearly remember, because I was in private practice at the time, 2000, you might recall, everybody was in a fit. How will our computer systems be able to cope with the move from 1999 over into 2000? And we had all sorts of plans, and it went seamlessly. We didn't know. So in some of these issues, I think we need to have good faith that the knowledge that we will have will carry us through.
Yeah, I think if I combine what the two professors have said, it also then means for the future supply chain professional, they are required to learn a multitude of skills and competencies to be able to cope with these overnight changes, which are not going to stop. The supply chains are exposed to different geopolitical, economic, natural disasters, etc. So the supply chain manager has to wear different hats and be able to have a critical thinking, a systems thinking that brings in different competencies and elements and strategies to be able to adapt and react quickly enough to save the supply chain and to remain competitive and efficient. So I think we try to teach that to our students. The different programs have got different modules that expose them to the different parts of the supply chain and give them different skills to be able to deal with business problems. But it's a lifelong learning process. New skills keep coming. The Internet of Things seemed like sci-fi a few years ago, but it's now part of our day-to-day. So students have to keep up with these innovations and developments and acquire the skills that enable them to be able to solve problems that are presented by the new challenges we're exposed to.
And not forgetting that ultimately somebody still has to do the job by moving stuff from one place to another, packaging. So it is not only the strategic which is important, it's the operational which will ultimately be the pillar for the strategic to be successful.
And part of that is also sustainability.
Yeah.
Sustainability is a big issue.
Yeah.
Not only, I mean, if you look at the carbon trade agreements and the carbon, reducing carbon emissions and so on, I think the move to new technology engines, move to rail in South Africa. We've lost rail to a very large extent. I've just been down to the Cape Town area, and I was traveling down that railway line there, long distances, maybe for hours. I think we saw one train over 2 days. And it's terrible. I mean, from Cape Town to Johannesburg is a major corridor for us, a freight corridor. And if you look at the trucks, I think they outnumbered the cars by a factor of 5 to 1, maybe 8 to 1 on that road. So sustainability is also important. And it's also important that the government focuses on sustainable transport in their strategies. They must get Transnet right to do the work that it should be doing in the shipping industry, although we don't own ships, but the policies are important around that. Sustainability is critical. We can teach sustainability, but I mean, in practice, we don't have sustainable transport at the moment because we're too dependent on road transport, which is a big polluter. It's important that that our policies are also geared towards that. And the work that we do around, especially Transnet as a monopoly service provider. Certainly now, if you look at strategies to get the private sector involved in rail, that will help a lot towards sustainability. And we are encouraging that, the private sector involvement in state-owned enterprises, whether it's airports or airlines or shipping lines or ports, seaports or railway lines. It's critical that we get sustainable transportation systems going. If government cannot do it, they can maybe specify that in policies and get the private sector to do the work for and on behalf of them. And the energy policy in South Africa is a good example. We're moving away from coal, very slow pace, but at least the private sector stepped in. And today we have mainly suspension of load shedding because of the private sector getting involved in solar systems and things like that, because policy enabled that. So it's important that the policies are also correct from a government point of view to have sustainability, efficiency, effectiveness in transportation systems.
Okay. I think we've reached the end of our conversation, but before I let you go, I think you need to give advice to the new head of department. What should he look forward for? What should he be thinking about? How can he ensure that the department moves forward and continues to do well?
Well, there are many things one can mention, but I think collaboration and trust is important. Collaboration with not only government but also the private sector to make sure that we innovate, that we keep being relevant. And if you say collaboration with the private sector, it's not him only, it's all the lecturers in the department and the lecturers that you involve in the department, knowing what's going on out there so they can teach the students the latest what's going on. I think that's very important. So collaboration for me with the private sector and government, knowing what government's doing, influencing government decisions, policies and so on, I think it's important to reach out So you're also at the forefront of those developments, not leading, teaching what's been given to us by government, but also influencing that. So I think it's important to be relevant as a department, and to be relevant, you have to collaborate.
I think in line with that, the research is very important to strengthen the research activities of the department by collaborating also with industry and international partners to be able to be exposed to the emerging trends, but also for our students to have an opportunity to, especially masters and PhD students, to work on topics that are impactful for industry and for government. I think that's an area where the department can contribute more and have more visibility in the space of transport and logistics. The collaboration is going to be very important.
Okay.
For the head of the department, ensure continuous and regular strategic management principles is applied in the department, meaning that you utilize the knowledge that you have within the department and to utilize that to enable you to have the contact with industry, to have the contact with government, etc., to remain, and the main thing is to remain relevant.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you making time to join this episode. It means a lot to not just myself, but also to Prof. Maketo. He said I should thank you all for doing this episode.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you
a
very
pleasure.
much.